I got to be so in my role when I'm in front of an HR group, because their natural gift is they're skeptical and they're always looking for what's wrong, and you got to use certain words. You can't use other words, and oh my gosh.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But it's there.
Okay. Well,
you'll learn more to come.
More to come. I love it.
All right, Bryan, I got 3 o'clock on the nose, and I know you can fill an hour without any problems. So I'm going to say, you know what, if people come in a little late, they come in a little late. That's okay. Just real quick, you guys have, I think most of you have met virtually or in person, Bryan. So I'm just going to turn over to Bryan. He's got a couple of cases he's going to walk you guys through and some things along those lines, and spend a good next hour. So, Bryan, it's all yours.
Rock and roll. Well, one of the things that we were looking at doing today was putting on, and this is informal, and we can make this as interactive as you want. What I was asked to do was to look at a few different profiles and just talk about, how some different profiles can be, wildly different and unique and all that kind of stuff. And so I brought up a couple of profiles and really what I was hoping to be able to do today a little bit is just look at some weird, wacky stuff and just talk through it. And sometimes we look at profiles and we go, man, is that accurate? Is it valid? Is it this? Is it that? And one of the cool things is learning from different practitioners. You learn little tips and tricks, and you learn little different insights and ways to look at things a little bit differently. And so this is really just going to be in the trenches. I'm going to give you a couple stories on a couple different folks. We'll look at some of the things, and then we'll just kind of see where it shakes out and where it goes. And then even on the fly, if somebody wants to email me a profile to go through, I'm not here to say that I'm better than anybody else is. I love that book, Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers. I read that, and it's a research project. You can get into whatever, if you want to argue with the research. But what I found to be very interesting is, he basically looks at it and says, what is the unique characteristics of those that actually make it, like really make it? And one of the things he lands on is at 10,000 hours, you can become best in the world at something. 10,000 hours. So he looks at Steve Jobs and, these different folks who, really became something. And also what played a part was also timing, right? And it was also different things. But, folks like Steve Jobs, Sun Microsystems creator, there's like 4 or 5 different individuals that are all big tech folks. Some key characteristics among these folks was they got access to computers at a very early age. And so what they started to do was they started messing around when they were, 11, 12, 13 years old, getting access to a mainframe back in the, 70s when, literally computer science doctorates of computer science in universities were maybe able to get 1 hour of programming time a day where they do the punch hard, they put it in the system, try their program, it didn't work. They had to wait 24 hours before they got access to it again. So that 10,000 hours thing is pretty key. And so in 2000, I got introduced to the trimetric system, the 3 different instruments at that time when Jay and Bill and all of them rolled it out. And I went right into interpreting profiles, and I didn't have background in DISC. I didn't have background in values. I didn't have background in AI. I literally was baptized into all 3 at the same time. And I happened to sell a project to a really, really large organization that had, hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. And they bought me. And they assumed that I knew how to execute on the ability to understand and interpret and write these profiles in a way that, take basically the 80-some pages and summarize it down to a 2-paragraph summary. And so I hit my 10,000 hours with these profiles. I'm guessing when I've gone back, it's somewhere in that 2006, 2007. I know I hit my 10,000 hours of actually working with the profile, face-to-face, debrief, writing it out, all that kind of stuff. And so I hope I can maybe impart and give you a couple of insights and ideas today on some stuff that might help you to see things a little bit differently. So I'm going to give you a couple things today when I go through a profile that might help out. And that's really what this is, Gerard. Jump in anytime if I'm off in something, or Phil or Nancy, anybody that's on, just jump in and say, hey, tell me more about this. But one of the things, like this guy named Bill, okay, so Bill's profile was interesting. Obviously, we look at the disc, and there's nothing in there that stands out and shocks us. But one of the things that we do know is the further, up and down, or the higher and lower some of the scores are, we can't have all 4 above or all 4 below, or it's not a valid disc. But the closer we get to that midpoint, the more it indicates that there could be some sort of pressure, some sort of, I like the phrase, all things to all people. So natural style, nothing really stands out. He's remember, we're working with the 4 new words here on the behavioral piece. So high is decisive, low is deliberate. So this individual is a very deliberate individual who comes off as, nice guy, accurate, gets things done right. His adjustment or adapt to the environment gets a little tighter. Yeah, nothing big, whoop-de-freaking do. I don't get overly worked up when I look at a disc. It is what it is. Going to his values, what drives this guy named Bill? Bill is a structured sucker, man. He's got a belief about the way life should be, loves doing research, loves complexity, getting into it, the high theoretical, wants to be in charge and own it. And, the low aesthetic, maybe he's a little bit of a pot stirrer, or he loves dealing in a world of chaos. But at any rate, he's not going around trying to make sure everything's, really, really nice and tidy and clean and all that other stuff. Go down here into his attribute, or his dimensional balance page. Wow, right? That's interesting. 5-2 empathy, 6-7 practical, 7-4 systems judgment, self-belief, wow, self-awareness, and then role awareness and self-direction. So you go in to look at something like this, you sit there and go, man, did this gentleman get distracted, or was he off? You got the, you can call it whatever you want to call it. Personally, I look at those, and after, seeing them, I generally will never go absolutely not unless I see all 4.0s or 4.5s, because it's clinically impossible to have all 4.0s all the way across. It just means they've clicked and drugged those 18 statements on both sides over. But here's what happens. So I look at this. One of the things that I've found over time is sometimes we'll have the scores that look kind of normal on one side and maybe be all 4.0s on the other side. I don't write that off 100% of the time and go, wow, they got distracted, but there's a chance that maybe they did get interrupted in between the two. I had a situation one time where, a gentleman's wife actually completed the second half because he had to take off for his next meeting or whatever. But we typically would just ask a few questions to kind of go a little deeper. But here's what's cool about Bill. And I got to work with Bill for quite a few years. This is his original profile from way back, I think in 2011. I pulled this up because Bill's story is pretty cool. So we went through this, looked at disc, okay, whatever, deliberate, accurate guy. Regulatory, has a strong belief about the way things should be. Here's his, the dimensional balance, the order in which he thinks. So 3 things that we look at when we're looking at a dimensional balance scoring system. Obviously, external, internal is not one of them, but we look at order, right? We want to see in what order is he taking information in about the world outside of him, and in what order is he taking information in about the world inside of him. Second thing is how much, right? The clarity score, how much of that data is he processing? And then the third thing is the bias, right? A plus is an overvaluing of that data and information in that respective area. An equal sign is a balanced bias, and a minus is a negative bias or an undervaluing of that data. I love Dr. Watson's approach to this. He says, we don't take a micrometer to these profiles and go, there's a 5.1 and a 5.3 is higher. I'm just, what clarity is what it is. And one of the ways I describe it is it's like a data feed that I'm getting. And so as we look at this, I simply look at it and go, okay, so looking at order of thought, definitely, coming at it from the approach of big picture, because systems is that big picture, right? The systemic view or the strategic, 10,000 foot view of things. Practical thinking is that pragmatic, or what is the solution? What's the answer? What are we going to do? And then empathy is understanding how other people are impacted, just naturally taking in the data and information about the people in the world in terms of human interaction around them. So when I first talked to him, I just simply said, hey, Bill, I just want to ask you a few questions real quick about this. A lot of times if I see somebody that has a low I on their disc, which he doesn't, a low I, high C, high economic and high theoretical, and a low empathy, they're going to be really skeptical of a profile no matter what. That's just a standard, approach to things. So low I means they're a little bit more introspective, less willing to be gregarious and outgoing. The high theoretical, obviously is the part that gets into loving to do the research, and then the low empathy is what it is. But he was pretty skeptical when he came at it. So sometimes we may see them have a little bit less attention later on in the profile, just because they're like, you know what the heck is this stuff? I'm going to mess with it and just figure out where it goes. So my first question to him was, I said, Bill, when you took this, did you get the notification towards the end of the profile that said you may want to go back and complete it or check your answers? And he goes, yeah, I did. I said, how did you feel about that? He goes, I went back. It seems about right for me. He goes, it was a little bit complicated, a little bit choppy here and there, but it is what it is. Now, I'd like for you guys, as you look at this, to start trying to assume what role Bill was in, because that's kind of fun too as you're playing the guessing game, right? So I just simply, with big picture, looked at this and said, okay, so Bill probably has a blind spot in his empathy, which is his understanding of how people feel. He's not an overly complex thinker, because practical thinking is he's going to think of 2 or 3 different ways to solve a problem, not going to have the 10,000 different ways to solve the problem. And the systems judgment is, he's going to see that big picture and the cause and effects. I love the fact that that's the first thing he's thinking about. So he's thinking of that big picture piece right away. What's he motivated to do with that information? He's motivated to establish structure and order and do his research and homework so he owns it. He doesn't really care what type of an environment he is, a little chaotic. How does he approach it? From a very accurate and steady sort of way. And he's not necessarily going to go out and set the world on fire in terms of getting results, but he is going to be very methodical, very oriented toward getting things done in a certain way, having done his homework, owns it. What's interesting about Bill is Bill was the lead mechanic in a heavy equipment shop. So they're bringing in, dozers, they're bringing in earth moving equipment, all this kind of stuff. And the reason why Bill was going through it was the owner of this multi-location heavy equipment distribution business. I met him at a function, and he goes, I'm in the people business. It just so happens that I am a heavy equipment distributor, which caused me to go, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more. So anytime somebody says they think of their people differently, then I go, how'd you come to that conclusion? Man, tell me more about that. How long you been doing this? And would you like to get some more data on your people? And he's like, well, I'd love to get more data on my people. And then I kind of fall away and go, I don't know if I can help you, but I've got some pretty cool tools that look at people in unique ways. And he goes, I got a unique one for you. So he gives the profile to Bill, and I called Bruce up right away. Yeah, Bill's a unique one for sure. First thing I asked him was, what's the problem with Bill in terms of why doesn't he see how to add value in his roles, and why doesn't he see himself long-term in this role and in life? And he goes, I'm going to put you to the test, Arzani. You talk with him, you figure it out, okay? So anyways, first question I said to him, I said, here's the deal, Bill, and here's what I do when I go over a profile with somebody, especially a profile like this. I tell people this. I say, here's the deal, okay? Assessments are just data. They provide data to you. They may or may not be accurate because you're the one that answered the questions. And so all I'm going to do for you today is I'm not going to tell you what the instrument says about you. What I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you what the data says, and then you're going to help me determine, was it a good day or a bad day when you took it? Now, I know, technically speaking, we're supposed to say, hey, these are always accurate, it's perfect, it's great. But here's what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with a guy who's a low empathy, high theoretical, who probably is already skeptical. So I'm just going to say, look, you answered some questions with mathematics. It spits out some data. Can I help you understand it? And then if you think it's accurate, give me a thumbs up. If you don't, Tell me a thumbs down. So anyways, I said to him, here's the deal. I'm going to get granular in just a second, but let me just tell you this. So empathy is how well you understand and see and interpret people. I said 5.2 is kind of on that low realm, which just simply says the last thing in terms of what you think about is the people. The first thing you think about is what's the bigger picture. Now I've already gone over high level the disc and a high level and the values, and I explained to them the data around it. And the reason I start with disc and go to values is because they're easier to understand and they tend to get a little more trust. And if you only have AI, that's okay. I've done just AI as well. And so I just simply go through and talk about the systems and seeing that bigger picture and the theoretical problem solving and all that. And then I said, you know what, the practical thinking where it's at, it just simply means that when people give you a ton of different ways to explain something and you just get kind of frustrated and your brain shuts off, and because your empathy is so low, you may actually not have much of a filter between what's going on in your head and what comes out your mouth. And he started laughing, ha, 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 right? So I said, not only do you not necessarily really care about, you know, or see how people are affected by it, the minus sign just indicates that you really don't even care, right? There's very few people that you actually genuinely care about because it's just a blind spot for you. And he goes, well, tell me more about that. What if it was a plus? And so you can pull out your interpretation cube or whatever. But it just simply said, look, at a 9, you know, 8.5 and 9, that's HD quality. You're seeing everything there is to see. You get in that 7 range, 6 range. You're getting some of it and some of it's not there. At the 5.2, it's definitely something that you've really got to spend time on because it just isn't as clear to you. And given the fact that he's in a heavy equipment, mechanic shop, blah, 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 awesome. Well, here's what was interesting. Talked through that, and here's what he said to me. I said, and after I explained to him the practical thinking, the systems judgment, and then the empathy, I said, so Bill, put it in your words. I just described to you the data, and this is a magical moment. I said, I just described to you the data. Will you put it in your words to me? And here's what he said. He goes, I do agree that when I approach a situation, maybe I'm looking at a piece of equipment, I'm always looking at how the hydraulic pressures and the pump or I'm looking at all these different components. He goes, and then after I assess the bigger picture, I then go to where I think we should approach and tackle it, which is the practical thinking. So this guy's masterfully telling me about it. And he said, you know what? I really don't even give two, and he cussed. I don't really care how people feel. And I said, go even deeper than that for me, Bill. Explain to me a little bit more. And he says, you really want me to explain it to you? I said, yeah. You understand, Bill's a big guy, big shoulders, big beard. He's kind of intense, a little intimidating. And he said this to me. He said, you know what, Bryan? He said, when I was a kid, I never really knew which emotion to express when people got hurt. And I'm like, what do you mean, Bill? And he described to me a couple situations where like they were doing stuff and somebody got hurt. And he goes, I used to get in trouble from my mom because I would giggle and laugh sometimes when people got hurt. He goes, the reality was I just didn't know how to act if people got hurt. And I'm like, holy crap, that's a pretty low empathy. Now, those are his words, not mine, right? But that was just interesting as he described to me his external dimensions of thinking, okay? Now, we look at the reliability score and go, well, 78, you know, okay, that's fairly accurate. I think that seems right, okay. But those are on the lower end in terms of like what we would see. But here's what I'll tell you right now. I've seen tens of thousands of these, and this doesn't scare me. I've worked with folks in simpler jobs and simpler roles, whether they're in manufacturing or packaging or chemical, like, we're looking at, like facility maintenance stuff. We've got folks who spend their entire life doing facility maintenance in terms of fixing and cleaning stuff. They may not have very high scores, which means they're very content with what they're seeing and how much they're taking in, and we can talk more about that, but I don't get too worked up and worried. Some folks who only deal in higher end jobs and roles, they get a little bit more nervous about having a lower score. Again, it's a clarity score. How much data are they taking in? All right, let's cruise over to the internals here for a second. I guess any questions on this external piece? I know I'm going high level, but I want to be able to cover a few of these, but I just thought it'd be interesting just to kind of show you on the external side. And the transfer question I asked was, can you put the data into your words, Bill? Can you give me a story that might exemplify this or might resemble this? And that's when he would tell me the story about it. And that's what I do with everybody. I'll explain it. Go ahead.
Yeah, Brian. Yeah, question is like, what was his takeaway? Did he have an aha or oh, well, whatever.
No, well, the aha was he definitely, see, at that time he was dating a young lady and their relationship wasn't going very far at the time. And what's pretty cool is since this time, again, this heavy equipment distributor, I still do work with them. They're local here in Des Moines, Iowa. They have a leadership academy, and now Bill is now leading the entire service department. So he's got like 15 mechanics who all report to him. And his life has changed. At that time, his girlfriend. So his takeaway was, he goes, look, he goes, I really do like this gal. He goes, she just thinks that I'm a cold-hearted bastard, and I'm not. I said, well, yeah, you are, Bill. You really are, you know. And he goes, no. He goes, I like her. I said, well, I know you like her, but you're just mean. I said, you come off mean. You're a big guy. You got this beard. And I said, and you're a self-confident son of a buck, man. I mean, there's probably nobody you can't walk up to and think, I can kick that guy's butt. And he kind of goes, yeah, ha, 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 right? But this big, huge guy gets really small, and he goes, so what do I do? And I said, well, what do you want to do, Bill? And he goes, well, I don't want her to think that I'm a cold-hearted bastard. I really do want her to, I actually think I'm going to ask her to marry me. And I said, well, then, Bill, understand one thing. You're not going to just change. This is you. You have a blind spot in people. She obviously doesn't, but she's attracted to you for some chemistry reason. I said, so here's what we're going to do. Let's help her understand that it's not a choice that you're cold. It's just it's a lack of awareness. And he goes, you do that for me? I said, heck yeah. So I wrote a little document out, and I gave it and sent it home with him. Had her take it, and I described her, and she had a 9.2 empathy, right, which is crazy. And so then what we did, we actually went to lunch. And I wasn't doing like a coaching thing, but I helped her understand. I said, here's the deal. And I don't remember even her name now. It's been like 8 years. I said, here's the deal. Bill, he's not going to see that stuff. And so you got to deliver it to him direct. You got to put it here. And I said, also, Bill, here's the deal. Your natural thought of how to deal with the situation is probably not the right approach. So gaining some skills. And the only reason why he would gain skills, and the only reason why he'd slow down, is because of a value system that he has. And his value system was, this woman he wanted to marry. And what's hilarious is I just ran into him. We did a little leadership thing here locally. He retook the profile, and he was going through it again. And I'm like, Bill, how you doing? And he said to me, he goes, Arzani, I hate you. And I'm like, why do you hate me? He goes, feelings suck. And I said, what do you mean, Bill? And he goes, I hate feeling stuff. And I said, what's changed in your life? And he goes, how about 3 daughters, Bryan? 3 daughters. He says, you told me, 8 years ago that I needed to be more aware that I'm cold. He goes, God has a weird sense of humor because he gave me 3 daughters. And he said, so he goes, I care for these girls, man. I don't want anybody touching them. I don't want anybody looking at them. I want to kill everybody. And he goes, but I melt when I see them. And I'm like, huh. So this blind spot that you had your whole life, even as a kid when you laughed when people got hurt, now you've got a value, which are these kids that are causing you to situationally for a short period of time become a little bit more aware. So his takeaway was, his impact on other people was going to get in the way of his desire to A, marry the woman he loved, and B, be able to lead a team of mechanics, highly technical folks who are working on big pieces of equipment. So we didn't change how he thought, but what we gave him was the skill sets to help complement a natural tendency to not see it. So great question, Phil. But again, he literally wrote some stuff out because here's what's interesting about Bill. He wrote things out. He put them on his wall. Would he follow rules if he established them? That's a question, right? Well, high systems judgment with a plus sign, which means he overvalues structure, right? And he just so happens to be a high regulatory, right? Which says he wants to build rules and establish structure. Oh, and where is his C? Oh my gosh. So what was really cool for Bill was we were able to co-author for him something that worked. And not only did he follow it, he was motivated to build it. And his theoretical was high enough to where he said, you know what, I'm motivated to learn about some of this stuff because here's the deal. For me to be a leader, what's been getting in the way is not the stupid people. It's not the dumb inability for it. It was actually, he was able to look inside and go, it's me, right? So great takeaways. In fact, Bill, I love Bill. Great guy. Now let's get into the internals, which some of you are going, dude, shut up. Get to the internals. I'll get there. Here we go. All right. So self-belief, self-esteem, role awareness, self-direction. Here's what's cool about this. When we describe externals versus internals, externals are glacial, right? Glacial meaning empathy, practical thinking, system judgment. They don't change overnight. For example, one of the questions I'll ask people is this. I'll say, can I send you to a class so that you can learn how to have a gut reaction when you meet people? And they rhetorically laugh and go, no, it's totally stupid. I'm like, duh. Just like I can't give you an injection and cause you to magically have more capacity to understand people and have empathy. And or can I send you to a class to help you have less ability to read people around you? Or, you know, can I give a shot of, you know, common sense to people? Oh my gosh, I wish I could. So again, the externals are glacial. They don't change much. It just takes time, slow over time. They're literally synaptic patterns at the subconscious level, and it just takes time to get them to become superhighways. You want to read a book that helps you to understand how those are created and how to develop them and the amount of effort it goes into it? Daniel Coyle's book, The Talent Code. It's freaking great. Amazing. And what he talks about is called deep practice. It's a great book. I mean, holy cats. I've read it like 3 times, and I love it. Just because having kids who were very competitive, a lot of what we learned at the Olympic Training Center for wrestling had to do with this thing Daniel Coyle talks about with deep practice. But a little teaser is, how do you get someone to do 30 days of practice in 1 hour? Read the book, you'll find out. But that's that synaptic thing. So I liken the external dimensions of thinking to literally that. It's these superhighways subconsciously. How have we learned to take information in, right? Order. In what order do we take it in? How much are we getting? And what's my natural bias for whether I over, under, or balance with it? There you go. All right. Great question, Phil. And this internal side is going to speak to a lot too. So I already told about the fact that he wanted to be a manager, right? But he couldn't figure out how to get there. He was in a relationship with a gal that didn't seem to be going anywhere as well. So does this self-direction score a 4.0, which probably lower than that? I shut it off at that. Does it seem to be realistic that he may not, at a self-direction level, have any clarity on where he's going in life and professionally, and be a little bit hopeless that he's going to figure it out? 4.0 negative. Absolutely, right? So how cool is that, right? So we sit there and off that discussion. And then role awareness, right? Well, he's the lead mechanic who's wanting to be, you know, the head guy, but he doesn't know how to add value in his roles. He doesn't know how to relate. He's got no skill sets. Everybody's stupid to him. Why are they stupid? Because A, his empathy is very low, so he doesn't relate to him. He doesn't really even desire to have a personal connection with him. And he's ridiculously structured. His belief about the way life should be, his regulatory, dude, this is like having a Democrat-Republican conversation, or, you know, a Lutheran versus, you know, a Catholic discussion. I mean, this is, we ain't going to have it. So, and the dude's knowledgeable as crap. And you know what? He wants to be in charge. And so how does he add value in his roles? He's not getting any satisfaction from it because he aspires to go higher, but there's something lacking. He doesn't know the answer to it. So his role awareness being very low, not understanding how to add value, and his clarity, da-da-da-da-da. Now, here's what's interesting. The dude is able to take himself into account in this equation and go, it's not me. His self-belief is so flipping high, and it's still a negative. So the guy was asking the questions, but he didn't know the right questions to ask. And so what was really crazy was he looked for answers, but didn't know A, where to look, B, even which question is the right question to ask. And when he was subtly proposed with some of the answers, he didn't like them because most of the folks that would propose the answers to him did not, in his mind's eye, meet the clarity of what he deemed to be a qualified person. Truth be told, first time he met me, he's like, I thought you were kind of a little light in the loafers and kind of a sissy, Arzani. He goes, I kind of respect you a little bit more now. So whatever. But here's the thing. His empathy's so low, kind of a knuckle-jagging redneck, right? I mean, it is what it is. But here's the thing. This is just data. So, and through clarification and conversation, I would say even though it's a 0.46, I would tell you at that time, 100% spot on. Nailed it to a T. So that was just that's a good example of looking at it going, so here's the thing. I let the data and the conversation drive it. I never sit there and I can tell you that I never do it. I don't. I truly look at every profile as a new journey and a new experience, and we're going to let the data drive the conversation. That's exactly what we're going to do. So, and anytime we get Gerard, the other guy that was going to come on board here and kind of give us, we're going to look at that one profile that was sent up to us.
I've not seen him click in there yet. Kim, you're not with us, are you? All right, so I'll let you have the floor still.
No worries, man. I love it. That's cool. And we'll pull it up and we can record it. And if he doesn't make it, you know what? We'll be able to go over it anyway. So that's cool.
Sounds good to me.
Sweet. Let's do one more here. So this young lady was on a team and had worked her way up over the years. Had been with this organization for like 8 years. And they said, you know, she's not doing an effective job at what we've hired her to do. And now let's just look at her profile real quick. We'll just let the data drive it. So tends to be pretty deliberate in her approach to problems. You know, the I just kind of in the middle. So she's whatever, you know, not overly demonstrative and not pessimistic, just kind of right in the middle, right there. S, definitely more stable. And C, definitely appreciates having the expectations set, rules, etc. What was she driven by? Well, she's driven to take charge and own her work, loves to help, right? In a unique way, right? So this young lady was very passionate about taking charge of whatever she could take charge of while helping people in unique ways. Some stuff she's very bottom line oriented with. Definitely likes to not necessarily have structure, kind of a bottom line approach. You know, she'll gather enough information, but she's not consumed or constrained by having to know everything about everything. And at some level, you know, there's some appreciation for having some harmony in relationships and also, you know, whatever. It is what it is. There you go. There's your motivators. Here is her internals and externals. Okay, so empathy, high with a positive bias. Practical thinking, also very high negative bias. So when we see that, they're a little more of a pragmatist. So solving people problems, and the afterthought is, what are we going to do to plan and prepare? Internally, you know, definitely able to take herself into account. Still believe she can get better. Was getting a lot of role identity. So what's funny is they said, hey, she's not doing so well. But you know what? In her mind's eye, she gets a lot of identity and thinks she's adding value in her roles. But she didn't see herself necessarily clearly in the future. But that's some question. That wasn't horrible, but just definitely of what little vision she saw of herself in the future, there was some questions around it. So you look at that and go, okay, you know what? Definitely someone who should be in a role where dealing with complex problems with people, where she can, you know, own stuff, help in unique ways. And do it in a very deliberate, accurate. So probably not somebody that's going to go out and create activity and have to fill it. But what's interesting was that she was in a sales role. She was in an outside sales, business generation, and renewal business. And so I said, okay, so this individual's in an outside sales role, business generation role. You guys can fill in the blanks on probably why she was struggling. She would do the milk route, go to everybody that was already out there. Never lost business, would generally increase business, but struggled to have the uncomfortable conversations, struggled to do the hunting. And so we had a couple of different options. The takeaway was, what do you want to do with her? I said, well, she renews her business. She's steady. She's stable. I said, first of all, how did she get here? Right? And here's what I said, right? I guessed early on, because look at her profile, right? Ridiculously intuitive with people, loves solving complex problems, can be a bit of a pragmatist because her systems judgment's lagging. So she could procrastinate if she had to create and foresee stuff, but definitely good in the moment. What's she motivated to do? Own her projects, help in a unique way, but she's not crazy intense on any of those, but there it is. And she's good. Anytime we see this profile, we tend to say they do well when work flows to them. I said, so let me guess. Jen was probably like a sales assistant or in customer service, and she'd earned her right to get there. And they said, how did you know? So, well, the data tells us it's not that hard. But what we asked was, has she earned the right to be on the team? They said, yes. Okay, cool. So rock and roll. We walked through it. We gave Jen awareness of her profile, asked her if it seemed to be accurate. She started to cry halfway through, wondering if she was going to get fired. And I assured her, no, this is about the genius process of figuring out how do you leverage your talents and get the results you're looking for. So what was interesting for Jen was, because she's amazing at responding to work, because she's amazing at solving complex problems, doing all of that stuff, and she's a bit of a pragmatist, what we did was we said, well, what if the organization mailed out like 15 different education-based types of pieces of material that Jen could then follow up and ask people if she could come in and explain what it is they do and how it is that they do it. And we had somebody make the phone calls to set up the appointments for her. And you know what? God bless America. Jen became the top performing salesperson within this organization. Outside sales, and she's a low D. But what did we do? We followed the genius process, and we allowed her to stay true to who she was. We didn't try to make her a high D and make her, we established a process she could follow, right? High C. Allowed it to be consistent and stable, right? And we allowed workflow to come to her. The calls, the materials were sent out. And then what is she able to do? She's able to chase those materials, educate and help people understand how to do it. And she was able to do it in a non-conformist sort of way. And it let her go out. And what was great is we helped her create a closing line that said, I'm not good at selling. I'm amazing at serving. So how do we change this relationship from me selling and you thinking I'm trying to sell you to me serving you? And you get to find out that's why I exist. So Jen literally, even though she's not a high economic, and I don't want to get into the micrometer thing going, well, she's in the standard deviation. Just leave it alone, right? She's not a 9900. She's not a hunter. This lady is the exact opposite of hunter. Number one in sales last 3 years with this profile. So I don't ever walk in and say, I know what's the matter and I'm going to fix you. We walk in and say, what do you want to do? And because again, the genius process is this. Help them stay true to themselves, authenticity. Help them become aware of who they are, which is total clarity. And so she uses very little energy to be who she is. Now, HR, to Phil's point, right? HR goes, and what's great is HR came back around. We'd served this client for about 9 years before HR ever decided that they were going to embrace us, Phil, because they thought we were just out there schlepping tests and telling them they couldn't hire people because they had the wrong profile. And you know what's wild is we never did that. So where did that paradigm come from? It came from a previous experience based on the way somebody else had used profiles in the past. So a lot of times we are guilty for stuff we've never done. And so what's crazy is they sent their HR professionals to get certified in the profiles, quote unquote certified, educated, so they could help interpret them. And now they use it in all of their different dimensions within the organization. And Jen's able to stay true to herself. But here's what's crazy. The HR came back to us and said, Jen's kind of an anomaly and we don't want to build our team around her. We'd rather find people that are naturally proactive and aggressive and are motivated by compensation and incentives. So now HR is telling us that they want to discount people based on profile. Holy crap. 8 years. So whatever. whatever. It is what it is. So, okay. But it's a success story of somebody who may have the totally wrong profile, but could totally be successful if we let the data drive the discussion. And what's crazy is Jen's role awareness is so high, and where her self-direction was off was not at work. She was the breadwinner at that time, and her husband was struggling in life and everything in general. So what she did was she said, in my role as mother and provider, how do I do it and not lose what I love the most, which is my kids and my husband? So we are able to help her get into her role awareness and go, man, I do get a lot of identity from this. And I'm going to create even more clarity, and I'm going to stay even more true to myself, which meant there were certain things she was going to have to give up, and she chose to give them up because she co-authored it. So kind of a cool deal. Any questions on that? I'm going to go to this one that we had that was kind of a interesting one that came back as kind of weird and wacky. Any questions before we move on? All right, cool. So this is Jake W. This was sent to us. Gerard sent this to me, and we were looking for, the question was, is this accurate, or is there a potential for it to be a little bit, because the validity score was 0.82 and 0.60, right? I don't know anything about this person. So the question really is, could this be somebody gaming the system? Could a 5.5 be something that's so incredibly low that it's impossible that somebody could have that? First of all, I think I've already probably covered a little bit of that in the discussion around how I conducted that conversation with Bill. Without having Kim on the call, I'm just going to give you the objective way of how I'd go about it with Jake. So again, we have the external dimensions, right? Empathy is the ability to, at a subconscious level, understand the impacts on everybody around me, right? How well do I naturally, at a subconscious level, how much data am I processing about all of the people, right? And then what's my brain do with it? Do I over or undervalue the data that I'm getting? So a 5.5 just simply says, you know what? I'm on that lower end, and I do have these really cool, these little cube things here that are super freaking awesome, that there's an organization called Trusted Advisors created. I love this, Gerard. This is so sweet. But I would pull out my interpretation cube, and I would literally just give it to the person sitting across from me. But here's how I describe it more than anything else. I just simply say, look, the higher the score goes, the more clarity, the more information you're processing. The lower it goes, it just could be the less. So I just explain the data. I put it out there, and I go, and another way that we describe it sometimes is we talk about, these new 1080p TVs. Then you've got the nice color TV, then you've got black and white TV, and then you've got the fuzz, right? You got to move the antenna around. My little brother is a 5.2 empathy. Now, the people that know him, here's what's funny. He's 5.2 empathy, but he has a 73 altruist score. But he also has a 99 economic. And so everybody that he knows, they think he's the nicest guy in the world. Deep down, he doesn't really care about them. He only cares about those that he can leverage or those that he can help, because he was raised with a value system that said you should help other people because it does pay off in the end, right? But empathy of 5.5 is what it is. So I wouldn't sit there and look at this and go, oh my gosh, this person, but 5.5 on the practical thinking is, another way to describe it is, how many different ways does this person conceive as to how to solve a problem? What do they do? A 5.5, dude, this person is very simple. I've heard people describe when they've got very low practical thinking score, and I've got a good relationship of trust. We had one guy say, a lot of people tell me I just don't have that much common sense. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I just tend to not really think things through. I just do it. I'm like, well, that's lower practical thinking. So it is what it is. I don't tell people you don't have common sense when I first meet them, because it's kind of tough to build a relationship of trust after that. But practical thinking, the higher that goes, the more options and idea a person comes up with. The lower it goes, the more they can just get out of that multiple static electricity idea stuff and get just focused right here, right now. Another way I describe practical thinking or any one of these things, the clarity score is It's kind of like a thoroughbred racehorse, right? The higher that score, the higher the clarity. The full 180 degrees that horse has on both sides to see what's going on. Why do we put blinders on that horse? So that they can bring it down and go, I'm going to focus. And so the lower the score, the greater, the less I'm seeing, and the greater ability to focus on just a single task. And so I'll see folks who have lower practical thinking scores. These are folks, I mean, you show me a 5.5 or a 5.0, I'll show you a rock crusher. All day long, just give me a rock, right? Just gonna punch it out. Just gonna punch it out. Another situation where I've seen folks, we've got some industries we've seen, like in the packaging world, or even in the industrial maintenance world. We've got folks who spent their entire career just doing the same thing. They may tend to have a lower, we're talking the 6s, right? The mid 6, low 6 and 5s. Those folks, they just hammer out the same things day in and day out. And then systems judgment for this person, very high clarity, which means their mind leads with the theory, right? The big picture. They're not getting to solution or people. They're just sticking right up in there. So this would cause me some skepticism. I'd probably want to go, let's go talk about this a little bit more. But again, it could be a person who, you know what, maybe this person, all that they do is they go out and geomap. You know what geomapping is? These people get in cars and they go to the middle of nowhere and they put a little geo map so that the satellite level, they know that's the spot. And then they get in their car and they cruise around and they drive to the next spot. And that's all they do. And if you're going to make that a career, dude, you don't have to have a tremendous amount of stuff going on in your head in terms of how many different ways to solve the problem. And if you're not around people at all, okay. So the high systems judgment, it's just, you know what, it's not about necessarily the answer or the people. It's the strategy, it's the system, it's the structure, it's all that order stuff going on. So, I mean, tell me what job they're doing. Tell me how long they've been doing it. Tell me if they're happy or not. You know, if this person's a beautician, right, and they're dealing with people every day and they carry on all kinds of conversations, I'll tell you, there's no freaking way does that person, right? So, but this person is definitely a strategist who is not afraid to manipulate people to get things done. They probably don't think of lots of different ways to solve the problem, but they're overly confident in their ability to do it. So they could make some very harmful decisions that could hurt people potentially, and they would never even notice that it happened. On the internal side here, one of the things I look at when I see self-belief lower, the average that we're seeing in North America is around 6'2". Worldwide, it's about 6. It's in the low 6s. Here's the way to describe. When I first was given the profile and said, you know, here you go out and sow your oats and meet tons of people and blah, blah, whatever. You know what? They said, but don't give it to the president. Don't give it to the CEO, because what if she has low self-belief? How are you going to explain to that person that they've got low self-esteem, right? It's not low self-esteem and it's not low self-belief. Again, those are some vocab words we use that help us to describe what it is. It's an internal, intrinsic dimension of thinking, okay? Internal, intrinsic, which doesn't mean much. But the internal, intrinsic dimension of thinking is, at a subconscious level, how much intuition do I have into myself? If my clarity score is very low, or it's my lowest, it just simply means that I may not have as much natural, intrinsic intuitiveness into who I really am, or into how I feel, or into the me, right? And since I may have a little bit of a blind spot there, here's the simplest way to describe it. If this was the individual and I was talking to them, here's what I would say to them. I would say, you know what, Jake W., having a self-belief, self-esteem, it doesn't mean you don't have self-confidence. What this just simply says is, it says that you, at a subconscious level, tend to put everything else, the roles you play, the strategy and system for life, solving other people's problems, all that stuff comes before you when it comes to how you think and what you think about. And so that's the thing. In the order that you think, you tend to think of yourself last. And I would venture to say at a 4.8, Jake, you probably don't even really get to the place of thinking about yourself. You would deflect off and think about others. And so that's why when we look at the interpretation cube here and it says self-deprecating, right? Self-depreciation, feeling unfulfilled, possibly depressive, blah, 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 blah. those things are hard to kind of take in because I've worked a lot of folks out, 4.2 and 4.3s, 4.1s. Here's what I'll tell you. Those are maybe ways to describe it, but those are really net effects of what you see based on the fact that I don't take myself into consideration, right? Since I don't take myself into consideration, when I'm given a compliment, what's my natural tendency? My natural tendency at a subconscious level is to not allow the compliment in and for me to go, nah, it could have been better. In fact, I probably would say, nah, it could have been better to myself without even being prompted to do it. Why? Because I'm not going to naturally think about how I am doing. Not whether I'm doing good or I'm doing bad. I'm not even going to take that into consideration. Why? Because it's the lowest or one of the lowest dimensions of thinking. So that clarity score is just simply that. Now back with Bill, right? Bill's clarity score was off the chart high, 8.8. So Bill leads life with the fact that, you know what? Dude, I'm pretty good, right? Not only am I pretty good, I know I'm pretty good. So Mr. Jake over here, Jake, he just doesn't take himself into consideration. So in the minus sign, simply describe that as, you know what, I believe I can still get better. But here's the thing that's funny about Jake. Jake doesn't necessarily believe he can still get better because Jake doesn't even think about himself. So why would he think about that? Yeah, there you go. But you know what? The plus sign here indicates that Jake does get identity from success in his roles. And that's the highest dimension on his internal side. So you know what? Jake does have some clarity, even though it's a 5-7. It's his highest clarity in terms of in what order he thinks about himself. So in the plus just simply says he probably does go, you know what? I want to make sure I do a good job as a dad, as a brother, as a provider. I may not have total clarity into how to do it, but I do get, so the plus on us there, it says title means something to him. So if he's the head geo mapping dude, you know, it's like the funny thing in The Office, right? Dwight, you know, he's the assistant branch manager, and he's like assistant to that is a role awareness plus. When Dwight's so fixated on title, fixated on title, he has a plus on his on his role awareness. That's what that means. People that have a plus on their role awareness just indicates they get a lot of identity from, and title means something. And Jake W here, his self-direction score 4.5 with a negative. Here's the thing. Remember, Bill didn't see himself in his role, didn't see himself in his relationship, and wasn't as hopeful that he was going to figure it out. When people are in job change mode or they're at a major crossroad, so I just explain that to them. I say, you know what, Jake, here this indicates, right? It just indicates that you may not have that much clarity on where you're going right now, right? And you may have been in this lack of clarity for quite a while. And that's why it's moved over to a minus, which says I not only don't see where I'm going, I'm not as optimistic I'm going to figure it out. And that's a simple way to describe lower self-direction. So anytime I get into that 6s, 5s, and 4s, again, not as much clarity. The plus sign could indicate I'm optimistic I'm going to figure it out, plus, or the minus just simply says, I'm not quite sure. I've been here long enough. This might be the new normal. Or I've been in job change mode for so long, I don't think I'm going to find that job again that I'm looking for. So I wouldn't take Jake's profile and you know, kick it to the curb and go, no way. But it does definitely, you know, it does, you know, prompt me to go, I'd like to talk to this dude. I venture to say either it was just a bad day or whatever, but I've learned not to make any assumptions after having the opportunity to go over these with so many folks. I'm going to shut up here a little bit. Gerard, you want to jump in, or Nancy, anybody on the call here? Phil, any questions?
You still got 6 minutes, so go for it.
Yeah, if you do find, say Jake does go, you know what, it was a bad day, I was distracted. Okay, cool. I mean, I've got unlimited access. How about I just send you the link when you have time? Make sure you can, you know, dedicate some time to this, and we'll get back together. And that very well could be the case as well. But I'll shut up here. Go ahead. Any questions?
Hi, Bryan. This is Nancy.
Hey, Nancy.
I
just lost you. You hit. I
was reading an article.
Start. I need you to start over, Nancy. Somehow you got muted.
Okay. I was reading an article, and it somehow suggested, especially with regard to sales, and some of us want to use these instruments as a means of finding our way into working with people in an organization, that it could be of value with the understanding the profile of the economic decision maker to determine how or what will lead us the opportunity to go forward. And when you were talking about the person who had the low D, high C, low empathy, being skeptical, would that be something we want to look at to figure out how to proceed with the economic decision maker?
Absolutely. And here's the thing too, with your economic decision maker, it's a good question. Here's what I found. I won't meet with anybody unless they take a profile. I don't even care if we're going to go to lunch or breakfast. I always give it to them, and it's just an opportunity to educate them. I don't care. I look at it as two things. A, I get to test my skills, and B, I'm going to create an experience where they're going to walk away going, "Oh my gosh, that person like said stuff to me nobody else has known." But yes, if you're gonna meet anybody, and here's how I blame it on this. I say, you know what? Everything that we do is going to revolve around turning very subjective things into objective things. And talent is very subjective. And so in an effort to help you understand how we look at talent, I'm going to send you an online questionnaire, take you 15, 20 minutes. And if you'll complete that online questionnaire before we get together, then it'll be more effective because you'll be able to see with real data what we're talking about versus just in theory.
Okay.
So absolutely, Nancy. And here's what's interesting. It's not about me selling them when they're there. It's honestly about me getting them to realize that we measure data at such a deep level about people that honestly, I want them to get done and I want them to go home and tell their significant other, I had a spiritual experience today at the office, right? I mean, I love it when a CIC calls me and goes, "Oh my gosh, because again, I tell the new CICs, you've got to do 100 debriefs in your first 3 to 6 months. If you don't do 100 debriefs, you're never going to get there. And so you want to debrief everybody. But what you want to do is you want to let them know, look, we gather more data on people than anybody under the sun. And I don't make any opinions beforehand. So in each organization is different. You know, the economic buyer is going to have their own opinion, their own paradigm. They're going to have their own profile. But what you want to give them is an experience. And once they've had an experience, then they're going to go, that Nancy, she knows her stuff. And I see her as a trusted advisor to me now, right? I mean, that's what you want to be. I love that. I mean, you know, that is such a powerful name, right? I want to be trusted. How do I get trusted? I become the person that you're willing to call to ask me the question you couldn't ask anybody else. So, heck yeah.
Bryan, do you do all 3 profiles?
What's that?
Do you do all 3 profiles for just before you even meet them?
I will, every time.
Every time.
Yep. I mean, if you're comfortable in just one of them, if you're comfortable in just the attribute index, then rock and roll, God bless you, do it. But I look at the client relationship as a long-term one. And if I knock their socks off, I only get one shot to knock their socks off. So, again, I've worked with some folks that only have access to AI or don't only want to use AI. That's cool. But if it's me and I have my druthers, I'm going to give you all 3.
How much time do you spend on it?
It'll depend. You got to get good enough to where you can summarize it in 15 minutes, right? Or 10 minutes, which is not going to do justice, but you can kind of wow the crap out of them, right? And there's other times where maybe you're going to go a lot deeper and go an hour and a half. If I'm selling them, if I'm in the sales mode, which means I'm going to serve them first. That's what I do. I'll serve them. Let me just show you a document. I'm actually writing a document now, helping. I'm sending an example here of. So Linda's summary, right? Although Linda might not show. I might go here in mine. Okay, Holly. Let's do Holly. So Holly is an incredibly talented research specialist who loves to help in a unique way to get results. She's cordial and gets tremendous amount of satisfaction from being able to operate in an environment that isn't too structured. She loves to have time to position all of her materials and information in a comprehensive way, unique way. She can be a bit of a procrastinator. She doesn't respond well to intense deadlines nor tremendous amount of detail work. She needs some freedom. So that's, I wrote that, right? And so let's see where Holly's, so, you know, so that's what I would prepare ahead of time. so that I could talk about Holly's disc and values. There's her disc, right? Low C, and there's her values. And then Holly's, Holly's, oh gosh, here we go. Holly's AI looks like this. So high practical, right? So she's a pragmatist. That's where I said, she could procrastinate. Anybody that's got a high practical over the other two, definitely going to procrastinate, right? Is what it is. Now the high Ds will argue about it, but it is. It's funny. So,
wait, the high practical will procrastinate?
High practical with the low systems, because their brain goes, what am I going to work on right now? Also, with her being a lower, her D's lower, S is higher. And, she's going to get bogged down in the thinking crap. And I want to help you, So there's a combination of a few things. But, yeah, she's definitely a procrastinator. She's artsy-fartsy. She's like, oh, this is a cool journey. I'm having fun. Oh, crap, I forgot to get ready for this. That's where she's at. So.
Great, Bryan. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. We're at our hour, so respect everybody's time. Everybody very quickly, either if you're muted or unmuted, say thank you, Bryan, and then we're done. And you guys get on to the rest of your stuff. Next week,
thank you, Bryan.
Thanks, Bryan.
Trusted Advisors call next Monday will be about the organizational assessment dialogue. And then we'll do another Intermetrics call, actually with Jennifer. Because we don't want too much of Bryan, because no one can handle too much of Bryan. So we're going to have Jennifer help us on May 6th, same time, same conference info, etc. She's going to go over some more stuff in Intermetrics. So look forward to it. And thank you, everybody, for your time today.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Gerard.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Thanks, Gerard.
Thank you.
All right.